Dear Grader and delightful friends, a very good day to all of you. I'm Shankri Venugopal with student ID number 860-830-235272. And today for our subject Ethics in Psychology ABPC 2203, we will be discussing on the title Ethics in Research with Human Participants. Firstly, before we dwell further, let's define what is research ethics. Research ethic refers to the moral principles guiding the planning, the conduct, and the report of a research. Ethics is crucial in human research to protect participants' dignity, their rights, their welfare, and to ensure that they are treated with respect and to not expose them to any kind of unnecessary harm. Now, there are some key principles, key ethical principles. But before that, I want to tell you a little about how these principles came about. There are a few different. The Declaration of Helsinki by the World Medical Association is one such. It provides global ethical guidelines for medical and human research, especially emphasizing on informed consent and the welfare of its participants. The Belmont Report of USA 1979 outlines three core principles: the respect for persons, beneficence, and justice after unethical studies such as Turkey studies has created reform. I'll talk a little about this later. The next is our APA Ethics Code. The American Psychological Association offers ethical standards for psychologists, focusing on the key principles such as respect for persons' autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, fidelity, integrity, and confidentiality and privacy. Now, when we talk about research ethics, this refers to the ethical issues that may be involved during the research process. Now, there are a few types: human research ethics, animal research and ethics, and responsible conduct of ethics. Let's elaborate a little further about this. Human research ethics. This is a narrower definition of research ethics and generally refers to ethical issues that may be encountered during research activities involving participants of human subjects. One type is the investigation and collection and use of personal, behavioral, psychological, or cultural data related to humans, individuals, or in groups. Another type is human trials and biomedical experiments involving human subjects and other related issues. The former is typically by ethics committee for research on behavioral and social sciences. The latter can be conducted only after the review of subsequent approvals by the ethics committee for biomedical research. The core issue in this category of ethical norms is ensuring the utmost protection of subjects, their rights, the physical and mental health of human participants and subjects while the research is being carried out. The core issue of animal research and ethics are to avoid any kind of infliction of harm or suffering on animals during the experiments as much as possible and to ensure the humane treatment of experimental animals. Now, we can consider this a very controversial topic. Next, let's go to the responsible conduct of research. The ethical issues focused on research conduct. This includes the avoidance of acts of plagiarism, fabrication, falsification, or alterations of research materials, findings, and making inappropriate claims of authorship, the academic publications, as well as interfering with peer review. These practices emphasize integrity in scientific research. Once a violation is suspected, the case is usually referred to or dealt with by the academics ethics committee. These three core formations of the research ethics are what we just discussed about. Now, let's go into respect for persons. As an ethical principle that recognizes the inherent dignity and worth and autonomy of every individual that is part of a research. It means that researchers must acknowledge the participants as autonomous agents and they are capable of making their own decisions. They must provide complete and honest information about the research that is about to take place and the individuals are about to take part in, and offers special protections to those such as children and individuals with cognitive impairments. In essence, it's about treating people with fairness, honesty, and allowing them to make free and informed choices. Now, let's go to the next. This is about beneficence and non-maleficence. Beneficence means researchers have a duty to maximize potential benefits of the participants of the study and also to the society at large. Non-maleficence means to avoid causing harm, ensuring that participants are not exposed to any unnecessary physical, emotional, or social risks. In practice, researchers must carefully balance the risk between benefits and the risk, especially in sensitive studies such as medical trials. An example of this is balancing the risk and benefits in medical trials. Like an example would be using a new drug. Researchers must ensure that the potential benefits like curing or managing an illness or disease outweighs the risk, such as the side effects or adverse reactions that might be faced by the participants. They must also provide participants with full information and monitor them very closely to minimize any harm and maximize their health benefits or potential positive outcomes. Justice is another core ethical principle. Justice refers to the ethical obligation to treat all individuals and groups fairly when conducting research. This means equal distribution of research burdens and the benefits. It ensures that benefits and burdens are equally distributed. Let me reinstate that. Vulnerable populations also should not be unfairly targeted or neglected in this research. An example of this is in a clinical trial for a new heart medication, let's just say. Recruiting only those with a low income because they are more likely to consent without proper scrutiny. If the medication is later only made available to the wealthy patients who can afford it, the research would not only exploit the vulnerable group, but would also deny them the benefit of the research outcome. This is such an example. Simply said, the principles of justice calls for equity and respect and non-discrimination in every phase of the research, whether it's before, during, or after. This design and recruitment of implementation and distribution of results is extremely important. Let's talk about the next core principle, fidelity and responsibilities. Researchers must act honestly and professionally, keeping promises, building trust with participants, and taking responsibility for their actions in case of any consequences. An example is a researcher should not make false claims about the study's benefits and ignore the participants' concerns. Integrity is another core principle. This means being honest, accurate, and transparent in all parts of the research, from the design of the study to the reporting of the results, and to avoid deception unless it is absolutely necessary and ethically justified. An example is the researcher must not falsify data or mislead others about the findings of the research. The next core principle, confidentiality and privacy. Researchers must protect participants' personal data and not share it without their permission. This is to ensure that the identities of the research participants are not exposed unless they have given the informed consent. This is by example of using pseudonyms and storing data securely to protect the participant's identity. Now that we've discussed all the core ethical principles, let's talk about reasons why ethical research ethics matter. Firstly, it's about protecting participant safety to ensure that these individuals are not exposed to any unnecessary risk or harm during the research. Maintaining the scientific integrity. Researchers must report findings honestly and to avoid any misconduct like data fabrication or plagiarism. Upholding human rights and dignity is also deeply important. Every participant deserves to be treated with respect, autonomy, and fairness through the study. Ensuring social responsibility. Now, research should contribute positively to society and to avoid reinforcing harm or inequality. Building trust in research and institution. Ethical conduct enhances credibility and encourages public confidence in scientific outcomes. Complying with legal and regulatory requirements. Adhering to ethical guidelines helps meet national and institutional standards for lawful research. Now, why does all of these matter? All of this matter because ethical research protects people, and without ethics, research can lead to exploitation, misinformation, and loss of public trust, undermining both human dignity and especially scientific progress. Now that we've discussed the importance of ethical guidelines and awareness, let's discuss a little further. Researchers' decisions really deeply affect participants' well-being. Ethical awareness helps to prevent harm, builds trust, and ensures validity in the findings. There is a reason why we follow ethical guidelines because without these, our research will suffer. Now, let's discuss two examples of very famous examples. The Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971, which aimed to investigate the psychological effects of power use in the relationship between the prisoner and the prison officers. However, there was a disregard for the welfare of the participants. A mock prison was set up in the basement of a university. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated in just 6 days due to extreme psychological distress. This case highlights the urgent need for strict ethical standards in researching involving human subjects, especially regarding information consent, psychological safety, and researchers' duty to intervene when harm occurs. Another such study is the recent Chinese scientist He Jiankui's announcement of his work on genetically edited babies. Over 100 Chinese scientists denounced this research, calling it crazy and shocking and unacceptable. This research shows a troubling attitude of do it first, debate later, and disregard for ethical concerns of manipulating the human body. A professor of immunology in the Peking University calls this a disaster and demands for strict punishment of this type of violation. Thus, we can understand the sheer importance of these guidelines. As we come to the end, we can clearly see ethical decision making in practice is extremely important. For example, the roles of ethics committees, the ethics as a continuous responsibility by the researchers, and the way the researchers handle ethical dilemmas in their practice, and especially the ethical reflectivity and adaptivity in the research. Now, to conclude, the ethics safeguards human dignity, fairness, and participant safety in research. Researchers should go beyond mere compliance and, in fact, internalize this ethical responsibility in every stage of their work. This will take research to new heights and uplift humanity. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.